New and improved IP source guard, now with 100% less DHCP, in this lab anyway. Because this may sound really strange to you, because we know IP source guard along with DAI, they're dependent on DHCP snooping. And DHCP snooping you would certainly think is dependent on running DHCP in the first place. So how can I possibly run IP source guard in an environment like the one we're looking at now, where there are no DHCP messages being passed around? Because I've taken all the previous IP source guard commands and DHCP snooping commands off. And as you can see, we don't even have the DHCP server in here anymore. We don't need it because the 3 IP addresses we have are hard-coded. So now you might be thinking, well, how am I going to run DHCP snooping without DHCP? And the thing is, you can. And the next question is, why would I run DHCP snooping without running DHCP? And I would say because perhaps you want to run IP source guard. So we've got to have DHCP snooping going on, and we're going to make some manual bindings along the way. Possibly the longest command you'll ever enter in an iOS. Not complicated, just long. First things first, though, we've got to enable DHCP snooping. And we also have to do it on a per VLAN basis. Since we're using VLAN 1, we're fine there. Now the IP source binding command, let's have a look at this. The first value you're going to need is the MAC address. And what we're going to do is bind the MAC address on router 2 to router 2's address on that fast Ethernet interface. What I strongly suggest you do in this case is cut and paste the MAC addresses because they're very easy to mistype. A couple of different approaches that you could use here. I like to just cut and paste it from the beginning. Let me show you what I mean. I like to just grab them right here. I'll do a right click, a mark, highlight it, right click, and you just copied. And now I can go back over to the switch. I did an incomplete command, no problem. Binding. Then you put the MAC address in. And here, with this particular interface, I've got to do a paste. So there's the MAC address, no mistyping, no mistyped numbers, no nothing, I'm good. Let's see what the next value is. Next, I need the binding VLAN, and that's going to be VLAN 1. Next, I need the binding IP address, and you don't put IP in here, actually. You just put 10.112, and now I got to put the interface in. And we know that's on FastO2. And that's it. There are no other options, so we just made it. There it is, IP source binding, and we put in router 2's MAC address on the fast Ethernet interface. It's in VLAN 1, its address is 10.112, and the local interface is interface fast 0/2. So you know what we're going to do now. We're going to go over to 3. Yeah, that's sticking. There we go. Yeah, blaming a keyboard. The last vestige of the mistyper. It's the keyboard's fault. Let's go back over to our switch, and I can repeat the last command to a certain point. Then I'll do a paste right there, and then it's VLAN 1, then the address to be bound, and then the interface to be bound. So we're in good shape. Like I said, you just have to put in these bindings manually since we're not running DHCP. And what we'll do now is go ahead and enable source guard on the interfaces in question. And I put them on both interfaces at one time with the range command. And let's do a little showing before we do a little testing here. And you can see the bindings, and there's the MAC addresses. It's always going to run off the screen there a little bit, but you see the MAC addresses, IP address, the lease is infinite for a static binding. Type of static, VLAN, type is static, VLAN 1 interface, and it gives you the 2 interfaces in question. So it looks good there. And here are those entries, and again, watch that disabled there under the interface. But see the interfaces, the filter type, filter mode is active. That's what we want to see. We see the IP address. The MAC address doesn't show up because we're not using port security. The VLAN is 1. And the only thing to do now is to do some testing. So let's go over to 2. and see if we can ping 10113. We'll just go ahead and send pings all the way across here. And there we go. And we'll just make sure we can ping VLAN 1. Make sure everything's good there. And there we go. Just took an extra packet. We're good. And router 2's pings go right through. So a good way to test this one, of course, would just be to change router 2's address. And you may wonder why I'm doing that in this lab and in the last lab when we swapped routers 1 and 4 out. You know, why didn't you just hard code the IP address on router 1? If you were thinking that's a good question, and here's a good answer. When you put a static IP address on an interface that was running DHCP, it turns DHCP off. Then we would have lost the binding, and then it would have just gone downhill from there. SourceGuard wouldn't have been able to work. But in this case, we have static bindings, so if I want to change the IP address here, instead of swapping a router, I can do that. Now I'm going to try to ping those other addresses. Well, we'll start with 3. And I have a pretty good sense they're going to stop, because what's happening here, of course, is that it's failing the IP source guard check. It's got now a source IP address of 10.11.22. The packet's leaving router 2. It's going to get to the switch, and the switch is just going to say, forget it. Not going to do it. So we'll just send one more for fun. And that's it. So we can see they're all timing out. No way it's going through. And that's how you configure IP source guard with DHCP snooping, of course, as required, without actually using DHCP. You just use these static bindings. And at first, you know, certainly a command that long, it's like, that's a lot to remember. But hey, that's why we have iOS help. Make sure you get every value right the first time. We are done with IP source guard for now, and actually for good. What we're going to look at next is a protocol that we've been using throughout the course. We've been using the Cisco Discovery Protocol, and we've been using it correctly, and we've used it just to make sure of our configs before we actually start configuring. But as it wouldn't come as any great surprise to us at this point, CDP can be used against us just as ARP and DHCP can. So we're going to take a look at that and some tips on how to combat it. That's coming up next.